there to all the questions.
Oh, wow, it tells you.
Yeah.
Got it. All right, perfect.
Got it.
Hello all, and welcome to our panel. This is To Tome or Not to Tome, a discussion on finding the right format for your RPG. I'm V. Hendro, your facilitator, and I'm calling in today from the lands of the Gadigal and Wangal people of the Eora Nation. And I'm joined here by three amazing Australian-based creators that I'm so excited to have here today: Ella Lim, Hayley Gordon, and Nathan Beattie. So I'm going to get you all to introduce yourself, a bit about what you do, and the game that you'll be kind of talking to us today about. So let's start, Ella, with you.
Hi, I'm Ella. I am a graphic designer. I'm also a writer. And the game I'm talking about today is Fox Curio's Floating Bookshop, which is a solo journaling game about owning a bookshop on a river.
Hi, I'm Hayley. I'm one half of Story Brewers Role Playing, along with V, our lovely facilitator. And the game I'm going to be talking about today is Fight with Spirit, which is a sports drama RPG about growing up together and fighting for your passion to win at the sports ball. And importantly, it comes in a big box. So that'll be part of what I'm talking about too.
Awesome. And last but not least, Nathan.
Hi, I'm Nathan from Arkenforge. We don't make a game, we do a virtual tabletop. So it's a tool built to facilitate playing games in person.
Yeah, awesome. So given that we've got these three different formats, we've got like a zine, we've got a tabletop RPG book, we've got a like board game style box, and then we've got a virtual tabletop, a completely digital software. The discussion today, I think, is going to be focusing around each of these formats, and then we're going to talk a bit more generally about what are the considerations of the format you choose for your game across, the entire life cycle of your product. So yeah, we'll go through each of these and talk a bit about our experiences with them and share about it. So we're going to start with Ella. With Fox Curio, like what did the production timeline for this game look like? And what was the most challenging part of that for you?
It's always really tricky with Kickstarter projects because you say, it was a Kickstarter project. I would say,
Yeah.
I'll finish it in 6 months. It'll be shipped out by then. It'll be finished by then. All good, except it wasn't like that. It was a little bit longer. Production timeline was basically finish mechanics of the game, write it, edit it, design it, lay it out, and then go get it printed.
Like, did you always know that it was going to be the format that it was when you were game designing, or did some of that shift while you were like in response to the game design decisions that you made?
So it was originally going to be a booklet that was going to be max 64 pages, but then that was an estimate I made before I'd really gotten into making the game. So it ended up being a lot bigger, so 222 pages, which changed the format of the game because saddle stitching booklets can only go up to, I think, 60 pages before their format changed. So that was part of the thought of like, okay, well, this game is a lot bigger than I originally planned it to be. So how was that going to look? So the options when the book gets so big is, I suppose, wire binding or perfect binding.
That's really interesting. So it did it does definitely shift, and to a degree, like the format kind of can be flexible enough in response to like how you kind of discover the game progresses. And that's interesting because when did you crowdfund the game then in that like process that you outlined?
I came up with the idea, and I think I had a brief outline of the game. I knew how I wanted the game to be, what the content of the game was, and I think it was then that I started crowdfunding. It was at a point in my life where I didn't have a job, so I was like, okay, I don't really have anything else to do. I'm going to do this now. So it was really early stages that I ended up developing the game and kickstarting it. And then most of the game design layout came after the Kickstarter.
And like looking back on that, would you do it earlier or later, or did you feel like that was the right time for crowdfunding? Because I think a lot of people struggle to find, I don't know,
Yeah.
Haley, you also find it's like struggle like to when does
Yes.
the Kickstarter go?
Yeah, like I said before, like I didn't have a job to do and I needed a project to do. So I probably kickstarted it a little bit too early, but also I think having it be a Kickstarter campaign, I have a bit of a weird relationship with Kickstarter campaigns or crowdfunding campaigns. One is that they're great. They give you really good, like people can find you. It's like a good advertising way, but it's also, I find it quite stressful in the sense that I put some pressure on myself because it's a crowdfunding campaign, and then that makes it a little bit more, I don't know, higher up in terms of this is a project that people are actively watching, that people are looking for, that are like wanting to see finished. So in that sense, yeah, I don't know. I think it was, for this project, I think it ended up working out well. Like I don't think, looking back, I would have made the project what it was if it hadn't been kickstarted so early, if I didn't have that pressure to make the game. I should also say that some of the pressure is also self-imposed. I feel like all the backers that I've had are really nice and don't put that pressure on. But yeah, it's a lot of, I'd say it's both knowing that people have put money towards this project or this thing that I've said I want to make, but then also myself wanting to make something that is like meets those standards.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think everyone here has run a Kickstarter, right? Did you, I'm going to jump a little bit here and kind of touch on those experiences as well. Like, did you find crowdfunding to be like sort of a similar feeling to Ella or different?
Yeah, so for us, we've done 2 crowdfunding campaigns for our software. The first one we did back in 2017, and that was, we only just made it over the line in that case. There was a lot of pressure to actually get it done, and we had some fun legal troubles getting cease and desisted by another company who we had a similar name to halfway through. So half our income right off the bat was rebranding, changing all our logos and everything, which doesn't help with product recognition at the end of the Kickstarter. But our second one, we'd learned a lot, and we built like a lot of hype beforehand. So that got us a pretty solid amount. But then, yeah, that pressure to deliver in the time frame that you specify in the Kickstarter is definitely there. And you get people saying, oh, where's X product? Like on the day that it's meant to release, like, we don't have this yet. What's happening?
Right.
A lot of that expectation management is there for sure.
Universal experience, no matter what format you pick. The sort of production timeline when you've really promised a big group of people becomes a very real burden. Did you have anything to add on that, Haley?
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think along with the pressure that backers can add, I also think they can also be like a really delightful, motivating input in the process and even help you playtest and shape the content and what you're creating as well. So I always enjoy actually having people along for that journey and getting their input along the way as well.
Yeah. So I guess considering this, one of the biggest divides as well as when you're delivering these things to different people is whether it's a physical thing that you're making or whether it's a digital thing that you're making. So for you, Ella, how easy or difficult was it to organize the sort of the physical shipping versus digital distribution of your game? And was there any like memorable stories through that whole experience?
I don't have any memorable experiences, thank goodness, because nothing went terribly wrong. Thank goodness. In terms of like shipping it out, so that's one of the considerations that I have when making a game and kickstarting it, is that international shipping is so expensive, and US backers are like my majority of the backers to any campaign that I do. So that's something I have to think about like really carefully, in the sense that there are different like tiers of shipping. Like you can send things really cheap if it's under this weight and this size, or but if it goes like 100 grams over, you're paying another like extra $10, which is I'm trying to avoid. So basically, I try to make sure that whatever I'm doing, and this is including like shipping materials, like shipping the product out as a whole thing, that it is as cheap as I can possibly get it, but also is a good size product. So what I mean by that is that my first Kickstarter campaign that I did was a really small game because I was sending it out in letter mail, which is really small and tiny. But because it was so small, it's kind of, you lose a little bit of how the game looks and feels because it was so small. And this one, I gave myself a little bit more space. So it ended up being an A5 game, but also with that came higher shipping costs.
Yeah, and I suppose the extra pages that you mentioned earlier kind of added to that. that kind of...
Yes, which is also something that I've learned of don't collect shipping when you're doing a crowdfunding campaign upfront unless you have the finished product and you know how much it's going to weigh and how much it's the whole package, including shipping materials, is going to cost to ship.
Yeah, that seems like a very common pitfall as well. Yeah. So I want to go from that. So you've distributed the game and touch on selling your game after that point. And so there's lots of different ways that I've seen that you've kind of actually sell your product through Etsy and Itch.io and your own web store. And like, I don't know if you've done any in-person like selling of your game, and then you've crowdfunded, you have, yeah. So it's all, you've kind of experienced it all. Is there anywhere else that you've tried to sell? Like, which of these sort of avenues do you think has worked really well for the kinds of game and format that you're making? And then I want to throw this question to the other panelists as well to see what their experience is in comparison to yours.
Yeah, when you put it like that, it's like, oh, I am selling. I've got a lot of different places this game is being sold. So they're all a little, I don't know, they're all different in the way that Etsy is a marketplace and has its own customer base rather than Itch, which is, well, actually Itch is also a marketplace, but also your own website isn't. So like you've got to do, you could tell people about it. You've got, instead of Etsy where you've already got people coming or like looking every day for it. I don't know. I think Etsy, I would say, is my biggest like place at the moment, which is interesting as it being like a handmade place. I don't know. It feels weird to have role-playing games on it, and I'm not sure how well I don't know. I think I just hit lucky when I first put a game up because it was during a pandemic. In terms of Itch, I think that's obviously like the best place for role-playing games to be found because you've got people who understand what the product is and are looking for games. I have sold some books in store, but this is at a little gallery in Hobart. And again, I'm not sure people who find the products know exactly what it is because it's sort of, I think it's a bit abstract. It's sort of outside of, like if you went into a game store, you expect, people know what a game store is. They go there for games.
That's really, yeah, that's super interesting because I want to say, like, Nathan, I feel like your experience here that might resonate is like, do people know what your product is, where you're selling it, and how have these different channels been for you?
Yeah, so they definitely know where we're selling it. We only sell on our website at arcandpodge.com. As to what the product is, it's a really like odd and specific niche we're in for tabletop. So explaining what the product is has always been our tough one to do, I guess. Because when people hear VTT, they expect like online play and like remote play and that sort of thing. Whereas we're a VTT, but we're focused on just playing in person. And because we also do like map building and that sort of thing as well. People are like, is it a map maker? Is it a tool to play games on? Like, what exactly is it? Because we're one of the few platforms that lets you do all of those things at once rather than being split into different software.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so
And
it's a tough one to
yeah,
pin
and a tough
down for
one to
sure.
crack as well. But you do have a big like in-person components to your product. So I assume that and you also do a lot of conventions and selling in person as well from time to time.
Yeah,
Do
that's
you
it.
feel like it's easier to do it in person or on your own website in terms of selling?
I think in person is definitely easier because we can actually show it in action. We can say like, cool, stand here, you can see the TV there, you can see the software running, we can explain like how it works. Whereas online, we get like still pretty good sales online, but it's a lot harder to convey all of those things in like a single web page.
Yeah, in an easy to understand way. I see.
Mm.
And Haley, with your, I feel like the challenges with a RPG in a box kind of thing is that it also has that what is it kind of define, and defining seems to be a common problem as well, like telling people what it is and versus what it's not.
I definitely feel like there's an element as well of like the channel that you invest in and that you know, point people towards, or like build up in the game's momentum is going to be the one that you like preferentially end up using. Like for us, I feel like we've been, you know, we've really built towards selling through our website as the number one like place that we direct people to. Even though you can get our game on itch and stuff like that. And I think that, you know, like the product that we sell is physical and digital. Like there's a digital version of it in the same way that like, you know, we all have digital versions, but Ella's got the same thing, the physical and the digital. And, you know, I think that the interesting thing is that I think for Ella's game, I imagine that the digital and physical are quite similar. Like when you buy the digital and the physical version, you're getting quite a similar experience. Whereas for our game, given that it's a game with a lot of components like cards and boards and things like that, the physical and the digital experience start to diverge. And, you know, all you can really show people on your website or when you're selling it is like the dream of the experience. You know, you can't really adequately show the digital or physical experience. You can't show the digital experience because that like requires too much like in-depth understanding of the platforms, and you can't fully show the physical experience because you're not physically there. So it's about the dream of what the experience could be that you're almost focusing on, right?
That's very true. Yeah, cool. So I want to go in there and sort of like take a look at Haley's game and Haley's case study here. So Fight with Spirit is a box role-playing game. What extra production considerations did you need to think about given that you were making a box game versus Fox Curio, for example? Like I think you'd have similar categories of things, like layout needs to be done and game design needs to be done. But was there any other differences specific to?
Yeah, so I do have a visual aid with me, which is this is what Fight with Spirit looks like. So like I said, it's a big box. It's like two of my heads, a bit more. And it's got quite a lot in the realm of components. So they've got stuff like we've got rule books, we've got pads of things, we've got like these card things that you use, we've got tokens. There's like these deck mat things and other cards. And the reason why all of that, I guess, is important is that you have to actually think about each individual component that you're going to create from a production point of view when you're making something that's a box game. And, you know, whether or not you want to use a standard version of it or whether you kind of want to use your own custom version of it. And, you know, the thing about using the standard version is that like it's always going to be the same as every other game. But that might serve your purposes. Like we've got these little acrylic gems in our game that are just like a standard option that you can pick from. And, you know, that makes them cheaper and easier and quicker. But then on the other hand, you might have a circumstance where the standard really doesn't suit your needs. Like we have these match games. These are a non-standard format size. And that means that they're more expensive to print because they have to like find a way to print this random size properly when they're printing them. But at the same time, this is the size that correctly houses the amount of information. And that also means they're going to fit into the box in a non-standard way. So you also have to think about, you know, the way it's going to fit into the box as well. So I think there's a lot to think about in terms of the way you treat each of those individual components. And it can take you, you know, a few rounds of prototyping and getting those from the manufacturer to kind of like nail that. Like, you know, originally when they did the box size, there was like this much box lift, and we were like, no, kind of people have to like stand on their boxes to compress them before they can put them back on their shelves. So we had to work on that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of bits and pieces to it.
That's super interesting to have a RPG be in that box format. Have you found that was difficult to convince RPG audiences, or is there like enough games now in that format that like Starcross, Box Fiasco, Alice is Missing? I think D&D starter set also comes in a box.
Yeah, I do think that like the box format of RPGs is definitely expanding, but I still think there's a very strong association between the box format and like quick light games that are easy to, you know, play and you can play them in a single session. And like partly that's because the box format, like, you know, first like popped up in the indie space with games like For the Queen, like actual very small games that you really can play in a single session. And even the D&D starter set, which was one of those for, you know, early things around in a box, it's like it's a starter set. It's not the real thing. The real thing comes in a big book. It comes in a tome, right? So you know, like I still think there's a perception in people's heads that if something comes in a box, it's meant to be light and quick and like played in a single session. You know, and I do think that in some ways, Fight with Spirit being a box game has been difficult in that sense, because it is one of the sort of few boxed games that's not a starter set, that isn't a quick game. You know, you're meant to sit down and play this game for like 6 to 8 sessions or whatever. And like we did think about that in the physical format. You have like a little box to save state your game by putting your cards and tokens in there and stuff. But at the same time, like I think that people just aren't having that sort of mental sense of that this is a big game with a lot to do and a lot of possibility that you get when you show someone like a big, thick book, right? And I think that you know, when you show someone a big thick book, they're like, the game is in the air, the game is in the imagination, in the mind, in the space, in the air. When you show someone a box, they're like, the game is in the box is a contained space, therefore the game must be contained. You're like, no, it's still in the mind, in the air, in the imagination, come on, we can do this. So yes, in short, I do think it's still difficult to get people used to the idea of a game that comes in the box but is also meant for ongoing sort of immersive and in-depth play.
I'm gonna ask one more question before we move on to Nathan here. But with a big box game like Fight with Spirit, you know, offset printing costs a fair bit, and there's global shipping and warehousing sort of to be considered for a big product like this. What are the pitfalls to avoid there, and how do you know whether you should do a print run of a physical product as opposed to either print on demand or maybe just like a really, really small print runs?
So I think when you're talking about like a boxed game, like there are some print on demand options, but they're like not very big or well established yet, and they're also very expensive. So when it comes to a box game, I do think that it's really only something like worth doing economically, probably, in my mind, if you can afford to do an offset print run. And depending on the format of the game, like that can be anywhere from a minimum of 500 copies to a minimum of like 1,500 copies, and also depending on the manufacturer you're working with. I think when it comes to your more traditional like book format, I feel like it is like sort of two main considerations behind it. The first one is like just a pure economic proposition. Like, okay, this is going to cost me this much to print this many games. I could sell this many games to this many people, and I'm also going to have to ship them here. So what's the cost of that? Tally that all up, compare that to the cost of printing on demand. So like a pure economic proposition is really a good starting place. But then the other two things to think about is an offset print runs, you obviously like have much more control over what you're doing, what you're creating. Like you can access formats that don't often appear in on demand, like spiral bound. I don't know if they can do print on demand spiral bound, maybe they can. And you know, like different choices that, you know, like a foil embossing on your cover or whatever that you just don't have access to in print on demand. And often like you'll get you can access high quality stock and stuff like that as well. And then of course the obvious, whereas when you're printing an offset print run, you're going to get a lot of copies of your thing at the same time, and you need to know what to do with them. And if you're planning on shipping globally and your thing doesn't fit in a letter-sized envelope, then you have to have a plan for how you're going to deal with the high cost of international shipping. And that plan can make or break whether people are going to back you or invest in your product, because, you know, at the end of the day, no one wants to pay $40 for shipping.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about Arkenforge. This is a totally different, sort of a departure from the physical realm, to some degree. So Arkenforge is a tool to help role players, and unlike a game where you are marketing to people who are wanting to play that game, you're reaching out in a whole different way, to a whole different sort of audience. How have you found your audience, or how has Arkenforge found its audience over the years? What has worked, what hasn't?
Yeah, so I guess in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's more difficult than dealing with like an actual game, because we're targeting people that play any game in person. So on that front, it doesn't matter if like, oh, we want a game of this sort of theme or this sort of vibe. That's kind of irrelevant to our marketing. It's more we want to play a game and make it really immersive, have like all our fancy maps and audio and stuff going. So we tend to have people who are more like tech savvy, I guess, who do want that sort of elevated experience. And because we're built for playing games like in person with a digital table sort of thing, there is that, it's almost like a luxury product, I'd say, at this point, where like a lot of people have spent a good couple of grand on a fancy table and game room and that sort of thing. And that's really where we work the best. So we find for us, any in-person convention is always good because we're an in-person tool, as we said before. So that definitely helps us a lot. We find things like pop culture conventions, of like comics, tabletop, just general pop culture stuff. We don't tend to do as well at those because it's not a lot of like hardcore role players there. So we tend to only go to conventions where it is like just tabletop focused. Because a lot of those other conventions, people like either trinkets or something they can like pick up and take away from it. So selling a digital product is something a lot of people aren't used to for conventions. And that is one that we're still working to overcome, and finding ways to say, hey, this is a thing that you can buy here on site and not take our flyer, go to our website and check it out sort of thing. So I'd say, yeah, that's probably our main difficulties that we've had with it, is just explaining in person that, yes, this is software, you can buy it here and you don't need to go off and grab it elsewhere kind of thing.
Do you think that there is, like, you're talking about how role playing kind of has matured, and there's a lot more people who even want these kinds of like luxury products in their hobby. Do you feel like now is a really good time for people to like make games or products that are not sort of like, that are more generalist in approach, where it's meant to supplement other games or experiences? Have you felt like that has been easier over the years? Is that proportion of people who are like super deep into it, who are setting up their game room, has definitely like increased?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for digital tools especially, COVID helped a lot, because a lot of people suddenly had to go online, and now that they're coming back in person, they still want that full like digital experience, but they want to be in the same room as their friends as well. So on that
they've been spoiled by the digital tools.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, getting a lot of those people in has been probably the main source of growth, I'd say. But yeah, I have forgotten what the rest of the question was, unfortunately.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the Arkenforge toolkit being like that's the core of your product, and then you have additional content packs that you kind of release over time, right? That's like, I feel like that format of like this core thing and then additional supplements, is quite common. Like, I guess D&D has that, where there's a core rule book and then a supplement. What are the strengths and sort of challenges of embarking in that kind of approach? What has that been like for you? Is there any issues around that, and how has the experience of putting together a thing like that?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, with us, obviously we've got our core product of the software itself, and then, as you said, additional content packs, which up until recently have pretty much just been like more map assets or audio assets and that sort of thing. so that people can build their own maps and do their own sound and that stuff. On the plus side, it's because the content packs are separate from the software in a way, like it's very different skill sets. So we can have our artists work on stuff while we're doing stuff with the software and not have to worry too much about any conflicts there. So things on the software aren't going to take away from art time. A pack running late isn't going to take away from software updates, which is really handy.
Right. How often do you release the content packs?
So we try to do at least one every 2 to 3 months.
Okay, yeah, so it's pretty fast.
Yeah, we've got a couple artists in-house now, and we're churning away and smashing out packs, which is nice. I think the big thing, which also is applicable to board games and role-playing as well, is that once they're in that ecosystem, it's a lot easier to upsell those additional content packs and boosters and whatnot than it would be otherwise. So with us, we get people coming in, they buy just the base software, they really like it, and like, oh, especially having like a Discord and social presence where we can show things other people have made using those content packs. So they're like, oh, this is really cool, I want to do this. So what packs do I need? Cool, I'll buy those. And then that's like upselling our customers, which definitely helps on the income front. I think last year was the first year that our content pack sales were more than our base software sales. So those upsells are definitely working, which is real nice. But yeah, I'd say in terms of the weaknesses that we'd have and challenges, delivering things on time is the big one. Early on, we had a lot of issues with scope, and we'd spend about a year bringing a pack out and then realize like some things didn't work as well as we needed it to. So we had to like retool it and whatnot. And that comes back to the whole Kickstarter people saying, where's my pack that I wanted? So yeah, getting that production pipeline, I think, getting that all set up was the big challenge that we had. But now that we've got that sorted, it's pretty smooth sailing at this point.
Yeah, that investment in the actual pipeline of your company is the thing that's allowing you to continue to sail smoothly. That's super interesting. You touched on a little bit how your community makes things that then help. How I'm curious about how integral that like support and feedback of your community has been to Arc and Forge, either for the content packs or the core product. And how do you, like, I guess, how do you get good feedback and how do you turn that into a better product?
Yeah, so our community is hugely important. We've got a Discord set up with like channels for requesting new features in the software, requesting new assets for content packs and whatnot. And a lot of the features that are in the software are because people just come out and just like, hey, I really wish you could do this. And we're like, that's a great idea. We'll make that happen. And that sort of community engagement really helps people connect with the product as well, if that makes sense. So they're like, oh, the devs are actually here. They're engaging with the community. We're getting support requests really quickly. So we're going to support these people because we can see that they're supporting the community.
I'm curious whether that does that happen, like Haley and Ella, with your kind of games as well? Do you find the same sort of requests or feedback? And how do you deal with it?
I feel like for us, like because of the long timeline that it takes for us to create a product, we get a lot of requests for our community, and we're like, great, 2027, I think I got something for you. So for us, fulfilling the needs of our community is about helping them to access the maximum possibility space of the games we have got out there, and also to create sort of open systems. Like we've got Pen to Good Society for Good Society, where people, a lot of people have jumped off that to make their own games, and like being there to support them through that. And I've had the fun of playtesting some of those games, so it's very much about like rather than that we can do what Nathan does, which is like, oh, take these features, that's a great idea, we'll create them. It's like, that's a great idea, you make that, and I'll be here and I'll be like, you go, yeah, we love it.
It's awesome. Ella, would that be the same for you or different?
As in like how community works?
Yeah. Does that, do you feel like, is there a dialogue there for you, or is it feel much more like you release the game and then people react to it, and then you make a new game? Or does it feel like it's still something that you can change? Because I guess like once it's printed, it's printed. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Physical product.
Yeah. It's pretty much that. Like I did for this game ask for playtesting feedback, which is probably the only sort of community input I've had with this game. In terms of like, I don't know, post-release and then having a community, I don't know, I've been thinking, I don't currently have anyone going, you should add this feature or this feature, but I've been thinking about having it more community-based where you ask people to create content for your game, because I think that really makes the game, I don't know, changes the game in a way. Like it's now an open thing that people can contribute to. So yeah, I mean, that's something I've been thinking about, but not something that I'm currently doing, but hope to be doing maybe.
Yeah, and a plan for the future. Talking about plans, like Nathan, I think we talked about a little bit in the past how Arkenforge has like a roadmap, and that's like pretty common for software. I'm curious, how far ahead does your roadmap personally go into the future, and like, do you find it easy or hard to plan for how far, that length of time?
Yeah, so internally our roadmap is years ahead, which is good fun. So we've got a very large list of features that we want to check in and sort of a vague idea of what order those features are going to go in. When it comes to like specific features and whatnot, we figure it out as we build it. So I'll be like, oh, I've got an extra half hour. I'll just throw in this quick little request that someone's put in kind of thing.
Oh, I love how flexible that feels.
Oh yeah, it's very helpful to be able to just throw in something when I've got a bit of spare time. But yeah, we don't release our roadmaps publicly so much because we've learned that if something does change, you get a bit of backlash there. So we tend to just collate all the requests, put them in internally on the back end of how it's all going to fit. And then people get that nice surprise of, oh, hey, this was requested by this user. Now it's in. There you go. And that makes them feel like, oh my God, I requested this and they listened and it's so good. Yeah.
I really love how doing something software or digital only has a lot of that flexibility that you can change and have that extra half an hour, and that translates to something immediately that people can access, which is not so for printed products. Does it going to the other sort of formats? Do you think that do you have like roadmaps as well in terms of the games that you're going to go work like in the that you're going to work on in the future as well, or do you think that is not a thing that you do?
I feel like we definitely have a roadmap. We always tell people ahead of time, and then we always change it. We try not to change what's literally the next product, although we have. But I think that the thing is to just mainly focus on one step ahead, because what is beyond that, when you have a long time frame like us, like one step ahead is like already a year. So yeah, looking beyond that, I think you need to keep an open mind, even if you have something in store.
I don't have a roadmap. I'm not that organized, and like ideas and things change all the time. So I just kind of go on the fly, really.
Yeah, I did say it feels like for that it matters less what the road, like the future plans is, but when you do start on a project, then you've got all the considerations of that thing and you lock it down.
Yeah.
Does that feel like that? Yeah, cool. All right, that's really interesting to kind of sort of get a sense of how you have put together your thing, your product. And like in the second half of this talk, I kind of want to talk, like kind of bring it to a more general discussion about a few of these sort of comparing and contrasting moments. Is like, do you think for your product, what is it like one thing that you really love for that format, and like one thing that's a real strength unique to that format for you?
Cool. Yeah, for us being digital, as I mentioned before, like that flexibility is definitely great. The main thing I think I like is just that it's a tool you can use while playing with your friends and whatnot, because I'm not a big fan of online gaming just because of the atmosphere is so different compared to playing in person. So being able to get that experience while still using digital tools is something that I'm a very big fan of.
I think for me, one thing that I really like about the box format is the fact that you have everything you need like right in front of you. Like, if you have like a big long book and you want to find.
Haley, you muted yourself halfway through that.
Yes, I blame this big box board game for clamping down on my space bar. Yeah, if you have a long book and you need to find something, it can be like quite a time-consuming process. And it's not something that if you have multiple people on the table, it's easy for them to share that information if you are playing in person. But if you have some like a component-based game like this, then it's just like it's right there. It's what's put in front of you, and you literally just like you pick it up and you use it straight away. And so I feel like just having that whole game at your fingertips rather than having to look through something, when you need to access parts of the game. For me, I think that's a huge draw to the box game format.
I always love printed things and books, so just having a physical product for me is always just a really cool thing to be able to touch, feel, and hold the product or the thing in your hand and to feel the weight of it. I've got it here actually. And for this one, I went with recycled print paper for the printing, and I think that adds a really nice texture. I can't really show it to you because my camera's not great. It just adds a really nice texture and just like imperfection to every page. That's just, I don't know, I think also suits the vibe of the game as well. So I really love that part of it.
Yeah, it's really, I really love that even the paper choices can add sort of that texture and vibe to the game. You'll have to buy the game to see,
Exactly.
it. Yeah, awesome. And so like, I imagine a lot of people listening to this panel are currently developing a game or product, maybe considering what format to publish it in, and maybe they have a strong idea of it, or maybe they're still open-ended a little bit. What do you think are some of the main considerations that those people should take into account in making their decisions?
Oh, I'll start off. So I think when it comes to digital, if you want anything with like you want to automate your rule sets or input like a lot of data online, if you're releasing more than just a PDF, then I think time and cost are going to be the two big factors in that. If you're releasing on something like Foundry, which is one of the more popular VTTs these days, you're going to need to probably hire someone with coding experience who can input all that data and automate everything. And every VTT has its own format to put things in, so you can't just like what you do with a PDF, just make that PDF and put it on every store. You've got to actually build for each specific platform, and that can be a very time and money intensive process.
Yeah, and one that requires a lot of expertise as well.
Oh, yeah.
You're good. Yeah, I think probably that's true. Ella, did you have anything to add for that question?
I mean, money is always going to be like a thing. I think everyone who are making games should have a physical version, just because, again, like having a physical thing is so cool, especially it's something that you made just as yourself, to have something that you made and just like, I made this and it's physical, I can touch it. But I mean, obviously that doesn't work for everyone. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, always costs is the main thing. And also, I suppose, knowing where and how to get things made or printed is a big thing as well.
I think sometimes as well, one of the things that come, in this thinking about like, oh, the format that your game is in, you might think that it's like a pretty like like rigid thing that you'd be like, oh, I'm making a book RPG. But do you think there's some flexibility in that? Like I know, Ella, you're saying you were going to make a zine, and then it did kind of change in its format. So it does happen quite a bit. So I guess my point there was just like, it's interesting to think about whether there is a different format that whatever you're imagining could exist in. And like, what would Arkenforge be like if it was going to be in a book? Like, could it do the same thing but in a book, or is it completely like impossible to do certain things? Or if Fight with Spirit, I guess, was a digital only experience or software, like there's a lot of different ways I think that you can conceive of what you're trying to put together as an experience, and it's worth thinking pretty widely about that. So to sort of close out this panel, I'd like to sort of ask each of you what is next for you, and like, are you going to be making something in the same format or a different format for your next project? Are you planning to branch out into any other kind of experimentation in terms of what you're making?
Oh, so outside of our Arkenforge software, which will be continuing for quite a while, we're branching out into hardware a little bit. So in Australia, you can now buy a full touch kit. So it's a TV with a touch screen. So when you put your minis on, it'll actually move the minis and interact with the software with toggle and stuff. And yeah, getting that in a good enough state that we can start looking at that for the US market is where we're heading next.
That is very, very exciting. I feel like that would be a great thing to have in a gaming room.
I feel like we're always trying out different physical formats. That said, I think now we've gone all the way to like full big box game. Actually, funnily enough, the only thing we haven't really done that most people have done in role playing is giant tome. So, maybe maybe we will pick the most conventional format next, something that's like really big and heavy and just has the emotional weight of opening it, can have an impact on you. But I think like I am also very interested in the intersection of board games and role-playing games in terms of components rather than in terms of play. And I think, there's more opportunity in different ways that board games handle different kinds of flows of information that I think would be fun in a role-playing game too.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because that's kind of what I'm looking for in my next projects, is to do a sort of board game role-play crossover. Like, I want to have tokens and things that sort of enhance the physical experience. I don't know what it's going to look like yet, but that's kind of what I want to do in the future.
That's awesome. I really it's really exciting to hear where you're all going with the stuff that you're making in the future. So that brings us up to time. Why don't you all give us an outro with where we can find you online? Let's start with, let's go this way. Let's go with Haley.
Me, I'm first. Hello. You can find me on the internet, Story Brewers role playing in all the places, or sometimes just Story Brewers, or if you Google Story Brewers role playing, our website will come up where you can find our mini games in different formats.
You can find my work on itch at lostwaysclub.itch.io. I'm on Twitter at lostwaysclub and Instagram at Ella_maybe.
We're arkenforge.com, and if you go to pretty much any social media and search Arkenforge, you'll find us.
Awesome. So thank you all for coming here, and you're all wonderful creators and publishers, and I really appreciate your sharing of sort of your journeys through a whole bunch of different parts of what it means to make and publish a thing, and all of the love and work that goes into that. So thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you for the next panel on Big Bad Con.
That's
Bye.